Yeah, hey everybody. I'm Peter. I'm the founder and CEO at Trustpilot. And I've titled my presentation, How to Stay Sane when you grow to, say, 600 people. And really because you can say starting a company, you already have insane. And then when you go through 10 years of grueling you could say challenges to grow your business, you become almost entirely insane. There's a lot of idolization of startup life, and there's a lot of you really tend to read about all the successes. And so what I'd like to try to do today is to talk about 4 things that I think can help you as a human being as you go through this journey. So the first thing is really about expectation setting and what is real and what is realistic. The second is about 2 things that I think is often neglected as you go from startup to scale up, which is partially the attention you pay to everything that's not your product, and partially the attention you pay to people, and I'll talk about what's the right kind of people, early stage and later stage. And then I'll talk a little bit in the end about why is it that your business exists and why is it that you're doing what you're doing. Ultimately, this really is also my story of starting a company and then of really coming of age in that business. And so when I started Trustpilot, I pretty much had this much experience in building companies. And I don't want today to be about Trustpilot, but I'll just tell you about it for a minute so that you understand my world and the stage that I'm playing in. Has anyone not heard of Trustpilot? Well, then I'll skip that part. Basically, I fundamentally believe that if you ask yourself the question, would I like to know what the previous 100 customers thought, whether they were incredibly happy or incredibly unhappy, I have a very hard time coming up with an example where I say I wouldn't care. It doesn't matter if I'm hiring an accountant. It doesn't matter if I buy furniture. It doesn't matter if I buy software. I would love to know what previous customers think, and I would like that to be credible. Has anyone not heard about Cambridge Analytica? And so I really firmly believe that in today's world there is a need for credible information and for knowing what other customers think. And so this is just an example. What I love being in London is this is a picture I took in the Tube, where you can see companies using the fact that they have great reviews to really say that's a good reason why you should buy from this company. So that's what we're building with Trustpilot. To give you an idea about why I'm on the stage today talking about scale, we're 10 years old. I'll come back to this later. The first 5 years, we pretty much spent first running in this direction, then realizing that was the wrong direction, and then with great enthusiasm running in that direction, and then realizing this was the right direction. And then in the last 5 years, we really had quite impressive growth. We've probably gone from 50 people to the 600 and something that we are today. We've raised a bit of money. And also what I find quite impressive is that our reviews are seen, this is a bit of an old number, but probably 3 billion times every month in the online world. We are as linked to as the White House, as Fox News. I would hope we're more credible. And I think we appear in something between 1 out of 100 and 1 out of 200 Google searches every day, all over the world, all the time. Now, this, as I said, it'll not be about tactics. I'll talk less about tactics. I'll talk more about general principles. And I'll start with the expectation setting, and I'll start with going back in time. So when I started Trustpilot, I had a small e-commerce business that was really going nowhere. And we were 4 or 5 people, and I was reading on TechCrunch a lot. TechCrunch had just started. And so my idea of the world was really very much like this. This is not the original business plan, but it's very close. So it says, for those of you who can't read it, this is my handwriting. It says business and go-to-market plan. So point 1, build a world-changing product. And I said, that takes 3 months. And number two, get PR and go viral, because that's how it's done. You build a viral PR campaign. And then three, I mean, nobody cares about the business model because, I mean, you'll go viral and then you'll be acquired by Yahoo or Google or whoever. And actually, if we zoom back in time, it actually, like point one and point two actually turned out pretty much according to plan. We spent, I think, 3 months. We built a website where you could read and write reviews. We built a toolbar. You know, remember toolbars? You could install in Internet Explorer, and they would be spammy. So our toolbar would tell you if it was a good site or a bad site you visited. And then we were me and 3 friends, and we started calling journalists and say, hey, we made this world-changing product. And because I'm from Denmark, and this was before, I mean, this was 2007, 2008, so if you remember those years, it was George Bush and Barack Obama, and not a lot was happening. And it was the summer in Denmark, and the second biggest story was the size of the tomatoes. So we actually managed to get on the front page of the largest newspaper in the country, where now there was this site where consumers could see how businesses treated them. Big news, bah, bah, bah. And we had 20,000 visits on the first day. But then the challenge with that is, can any of you remember what was on the front page of the newspaper 2 days ago? Anyone? No, right? That's why they wrap the fish and chips in the newspapers, because nobody can remember that. So my first lesson to really starting and scaling the business is, I think, if you don't have an engine that's sticky, everybody overemphasizes the importance of PR. Everybody's trying to get PR, everybody's trying to get the word out there, and the truth is, a week after, it doesn't matter. So we went from 20,000 visits to 2,000 visits to 200 visits to 2 visits. And the business model was Google AdWords. And so every time we had 1,000 visits, we would get £1. And so then a year after, this is the status after 12 months. So we have managed to fight back up to the original 20,000 visits. We'd get that in a month instead of in a day, but it was still good. And the MRR is $10. And so we can pretty much buy everybody a small pizza and a can of Coca-Cola for sharing. And that takes me to my the second point that I really want to emphasize today is that the reason that there are people up here on the stage today talking about a 3% weekly growth is because that's really, really unusual. And so I often meet founders who have these crazy ideas about, hey, because you read TechCrunch, you read about all these companies in California, you see people on stage who've done crazy things. You don't read about it all the time because it's normal. You read about it all the time because it never happens, and that's why it's interesting. And so with Trustpilot, it took us, I think, as I said earlier, 4 to 5 years with nothing to get product market fit. That's 4 to 5 years. So think about that in your time frame. And it then took 4 to 5 years to figure out just a decent way of figuring out how to scale that. And that's even considered a success. And so think about that in your horizons. If you have a 1-year, or 2-year, or 3-year horizon, you should ditch that and make a 10-year horizon for yourself, for your role in that, and for your plan for the business. The chance of you getting 3% growth a week is the same chance that as 12 years old, you grab a guitar and you become Justin Bieber. It's cool when you do, and you should grab the guitar and dream big and think big and live the dream and go for it by all means. But don't become disappointed if you don't become Justin Bieber. I remember reading about Kevin Systrom starting Instagram. It took him 18 months to get to $1 billion acquisition. The chance of that is pretty much like becoming the Pope. Again, like that's not what every priest should consider a failure if they don't accomplish. The other thing that I also really want to instill in people is that you always see everybody when they're dressed for the Oscars. You always see yourself when you're tired, when you're fat, when you're naked in front of the mirror, and you look like shit because you worked all the time for 10 years, right? And then you see the competition, or you see that other cool company that just stole your key employee, got new funding, and you see people here at a conference where they all look great. And just again, remember that. You live in the Instagram world. Just because you see it all the time, it is not normal. This is you, and that is normal, and that's okay. And think about that, and I'll talk more about how you turn that normality into a more decent living. So I think this is true. This was originally a Bill Gates quote. Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, and they underestimate what they can do in 10 years. I grossly overestimated what I could do in a year, like go viral, be acquired, but I had no idea what I would be able to do in 10 years, and I think the same will be true for you. Now, so that was the first thing, the mindset, the expectations. That now takes us to the second chapter, is when you go from, you figure out your product market fit, you spend 5 years doing that, and then you need to spend the next 5 years figuring out how to scale it. And so you go from, you can say, startup to a scale up, and I'll just like, can everybody raise their hand who are passionate about the product or the marketing that their company is doing? Can I then ask everybody to raise their hand who is passionate about their invoicing system? That's like,
in a bad way.
Yeah, or who's passionate about the system you use to pay salaries? Well, that's not a lot. It's an opportunity there. And what I really find in many, many businesses is that initially, all these systems, all these metrics, they don't matter that much. All that matters is that you get a good product, and that it fits to your customers, and that you have something you can sell and that the market wants. But then when you get that fit, the importance of everything that is not your product actually changes, so that it becomes your recruiting policy, it becomes your CRM system, it becomes your marketing tech stack, it becomes how did you set up the data structure, how do you stitch all your software together. And having people who are responsible for that and that are as important in your business and who are not treated like the people who are responsible for the server room or for cleaning up the coffee cups. I think everybody often just takes these things for granted. Nobody's passionate about it. And if you really want to scale, I've seen that again and again and again. That's where people fail, is that they fail to create something that scales, and what doesn't scale is actually not their product. It's everything supporting the delivery of that product. The next thing that I also find really is something that breaks companies from scaling is the recruiting. I often find people spend 1% of their time on recruiting, and then they spend 99% of their time fixing that mistake. I'd really say if you are less than 50 people, everybody should spend 10% of their time on recruiting. 10%. You cannot hire a person if collectively you haven't spent 10 hours with that person. Also, I would say really build an internal recruiting capacity and think about the type of employee that you want to have in your early stage startup, and that they are not the same that fits into your later stage scale up. The early stage employees, I find I often compare them to people that would go to America 400 years ago and would land on the East Coast with a mission to go west. And sometimes they would hit something like that. And sometimes a wheel would fall off the cart, and sometimes they'd run out of food, and sometimes things would happen. A great early stage employee is the person where there's a wire on the floor, they'll duct tape it to make sure nobody trips over it. Fixed, done, problem solved. And the challenge there is that they're the ones, a little bit like, you can also compare them to a band of Vikings or Indians. They just solve problems as they come, and they're great at that. Then the challenge is, as you get to the scale up, you need to expect that they don't scale with your business. And so I think it's very important as you go through the scale up phase to have those conversations with your employees that's been there all the time, and just be real about this. This applies to everybody. And in particular, it also applies to the founder. And so for the founder, I'll come back to one thing later, but I think two things apply. First of all, as a founder, what I did was that I surrounded myself with much older, much more experienced people. I think the trick there is that the more experienced people, they can always out-PowerPoint you. They can always out-excel you. They can always out-argue you. They always have better points than you have. So the trick as a founder is you need to give them space and do their thing and be good about it. And I see for many that's the easy part. The hard part is actually knowing when to insist that you're right. And really say, hey, you know what? I know that you can convince like everybody with very convincing points about this thing, but I know I'm right. And then if you are working with a young entrepreneur, a first-time CEO, and you have 10 years more experience, like the challenge for you is, yes, the founder should give you that space, but the challenge is actually knowing when to step back and say the founder instinctively often knows what is right in that business, and then let the founder follow that passion. Like let people have space, but also give space. So now, in the end here, I'll then talk about finding your why. I think that ultimately, like, why are we here? And I find that when you start a business, initially it is very exciting. You have your first job interview, that's exciting. Like you're hiring somebody for the first time, wow. You get your first sales, that's really exciting. You close your first round of funding, that's really exciting. Everything is exciting because it's new. And then after 5 or 10 years, it becomes very much like that marriage with 4 kids, and you have to get up at 6 in the morning. And I can tell you, like the 5th time you fundraise, it's not that exciting. The 800th time you have an interview with somebody, it's not that exciting. So I think for you as a human being, but also for your business, the sooner you can find out why you are actually doing this, beyond just the thrill of building a company, beyond just the thrill of making some money. Like, is your purpose with life to do 7% return for your investors? Probably not. Is that why your employees go to work every morning? So the sooner you can identify that, the more scale-proof you become, because it will take 10 years. And after 5 years, you need this. This is the CEO job. So you can say, I said set strategy, it could be set strategy and vision. Then it's like set the team. So that's your responsibility also. And then like make sure there's enough money for everybody. But what often happens, I find, is that the actual job is everything that nobody else can figure out. You're sort of this fire brigade or SWAT team that moves into areas of the business that aren't working so well. And I find, again, in the early stage, that's almost like it should be. But I find for later stage, either if you are the founder and CEO, or if you know the founder and CEO, like really encourage them to find out what is it actually they're good at, what is it actually they're passionate about. And then it's okay to do just that. And then finally, just enjoy the ride. Enjoy being on an unpredictable rocket ship. It will be a struggle. So if there's one thing I think you should ask yourself is, do you struggle well? If you make mistakes, do you smile and learn? Can you wake up in the middle of the night and worry and then laugh at yourself and say, oh boy, am I learning a lot today? If you can struggle well, you can have 10 good years. Thank you. So what practices do you put in place to make sure growing teams are aligned? One, make sure that everybody knows why the company exists. Then make sure everybody knows what are the, say, 3 or 5 year goals of the business. Make sure everybody knows what's the 1 year goal of the business. make sure everybody knows what's the quarterly goal of the business, and then make sure that they are then a part of the planning process. So I think as a founder and as a management team, you want to set the top of that pyramid and have that settled and say, hey, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to achieve. And then you want to encourage the teams to contribute and say, hey, so with you as a team, how do you contribute to reaching those goals? And I find if it can be collaborative like that and then shared across the entire business, that's really helpful in making sure that everybody is aligned. I think actually the last question is more interesting. How do you keep yourself from doing too much because you thought no one could do it well enough? Haven't figured that one out yet. I think that what you have to be very good at as a founder is to accept that things are burning and that's okay. If I find that a lot of people that are new to the business, they're like, oh my God, but this is horrible and that's broken and this is not good. And sometimes I almost appear blasé about it. I'm like, yeah, but we'll fix that later. And so I think what you need to be very, very good at is just accepting all the things that are broken and actually communicate that to everybody and tell everybody, hey, these things don't work and we're aware of it. There's several things, if you go to Trustpilot, I won't tell you which ones, where I'm just like, oh my God, that's embarrassing. And every year we're saying, yep, it keeps being embarrassing this year because this is more important. So I think that helps. So then how are your 600 people split between different functions and teams? We're extremely classic, I think, in that sense. We have technology and product, and we have sales and marketing. I think if there's one thing I've learned, it is not to accept any misalignment. I find often, for example, sales and marketing, like sales will say, oh, the leads are bad, and then marketing will say, oh, that's because sales don't follow up. Anybody heard that? And I find as a founder, that's one of the things where you can say you can accept a lot of failures in your business, but you can never accept failures in working together. Like it's okay if this system broke, or if this product doesn't work, or if somebody did a mistake, but you have to be relentless in looking about who are you solving problems with and how do you solve the problems. That's the only thing you cannot ever neglect. What are you looking up for scale-up VPs versus startup VPs? So what's very important in VPs is, I think both for a startup and for a scale-up, is actually that they are builders. Like what I see go wrong again and again and again is the big company guy that used to have, say, a 2 billion revenue responsibility and manage a division with 20,000 people, and they're used to having a person that carries their dog. And I remember having, there was this gentleman where he was asking me, Peter, where do I find the water? And I just opened the tap. And he was shocked. Like, no bottles? No bottles. So I really find that you have to ask people, what have you built? What have you created? Not what have you maintained? What have you expanded? No, what have you created? And then the second part is, so you love people that have taken something from 0 to, say, 50 million, or from 10 to 20 million, but you hate people that took it from 1 billion to 3 billion. And then also, you want to ask people, what are you going to do with your own hands? Like my question for my CFO was, can you do your own Excel sheet? Like, of course they can. The question for an early stage sales VP is, are you going to be participating in conversations? Questions for an early stage marketing leader is, so can you can you set up Google Analytics? And then of course the bigger you get, the less that requirement becomes, but I often find that emphasizing what people can actually do themselves. If people say, oh, then I'll hire a consultant, then you run screaming for the hills. Like they have to do it, and they have to build a team that can do it. Any tips on explaining to investors that it's going to be a 10-year journey? They know. Otherwise, I mean, of course, I mean, I remember that. I was in California, and I met this investor, and they were like, oh yeah, we were comparing your user growth to that of Instagram, and then they had this curve, and mine was basically just like a flat line. I'd encourage you to... I don't want the 10-year thing to be an excuse. I really don't. I don't want it to be an excuse to say, oh, we're not hitting the 3% weekly because this is a 10-year thing. That's not how I mean it. How I mean it is you chase that, you do that, but you just don't kill yourself if you don't get it. How close have you come to giving up? I haven't never come close to giving up. I'm giving up. Thank you.